Hi guys, I came out here to the van just to sit and make this video because man, I was having like a sweat attack in the house. I don't know why. It's like I just broke out into a sweat, and um, and I just wanted to get some fresh air. And then I came out here to the van, and I wanted to mention about my uncle. The funeral is going to be this Friday, and I wanted to let you guys know what that day was when I spent that last Thursday with my uncle, because he was so elderly. And that day, I kind of wanted to take advantage of whatever my uncle could tell me, because he lived through so much and seen so much in his life. And I wanted to eventually get to whatever details he could share with me regarding World War II, because I thought that would be fascinating. But until I could talk to my uncle about that, because I'm sure it would require several days of hearing all that he could share about it. The first day I spent with him, I wanted to get some information from him regarding my mother, who has been dead for several years now. And because, that my uncle is my sister's brother, and he's the oldest one in the family, the eldest child. So I knew if anybody could tell me anything about my mom, he would be the one to do it. And he says, well, what do you want to know? And now, mind you, my uncle at 95 years old had a very sharp mind. His mind was not gone at all. My uncle could talk to you like I'm talking to you, only in a more lower, elderly voice. And the reason why I wanted to know some information first about my mom is because I always wondered all my life why my mom was the way she was. Because it always bothered me, and it will until the day I die. It bothered me that my mom was the way she was. Being abusive and an alcoholic, and why she had so much hatred in her soul, and why she did the things that she did. And all I can say in this video is that, and I told my Uncle Win this, I said I saw my mom do things that I really couldn't tell other people. I said I don't even think people would believe me, the things that I would see my mom do. And whenever I'm around my one brother, almost every time I'm around my one brother, he always tells me, you don't remember mom doing this to you? And I always would tell him, no, I've got no memory of it at all. And he says, well, she did, and she did it a lot. And I got no memory of it. But there's a lot of memories in my childhood I don't have. It's just a black void. There's no memories there. The things that I do remember are bad and horrific. And so that's why asking these questions of my uncle were far more important than anything that happened in World War II. To me, it was more important to know about my mom. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to know about World War II, but it was just more pressing to me to know anything he could share with me about my mom. And I says, was it the death of my sister? Was it the death of her first husband when he was killed in an automobile accident? I says, Uncle Win, what made mom be the way she was? What made her the woman that she was? Why she was like she was? And he says, your mother was always like that, even as a kid. He says, I don't know what made her that way. But he says she was a very troubled person. And my Uncle Win believed that she had a very evil mind. I know my aunt, his sister, who's still alive and is coming up for Florida for this coming Friday's funeral, she told me that my mom was evil, and it's affected me all my life. But he told me a lot of things that I didn't know. And I asked, because his wife was there, his third wife was there at this breakfast nook we were sitting at when I had lunch with my uncle after doing the work for him at his house. And I says, I'm not bringing up anything you don't want to talk about, am I? Because out of respect and being at their house, I didn't want to bring up any bad memories or something that they didn't want to talk about. And they both assured me, they're like, no. And she even says, she says, no, your uncle will tell you anything you want to know. And he says, no, I'm fine with it. I can talk about whatever it is you have questions about, which I thought was great. So I knew that now that I've reconnected with my uncle after many, many years of not seeing my uncle, even though he always lived here, I didn't know where he lived until he called me and gave me his address. I had no idea he lived where he did. But once I reconnected with my uncle, I thought, well, if I work for him this summer, then we can have talks like this and he can fill me in and give me a lot of information. So I was grateful for that. I had no idea that he had just days to live. So I was fortunate that I got to spend last Thursday with my uncle, because that's the last opportunity I got to see him alive and even talk to him. But at least during that day that we spent together, even when he came outside in the garage and I helped him out of the house so he could sit down on his little walker thing, he continued to talk to me. And he told me things about my mom that were bad, going way back to when she was very, very young. And my Aunt Kathy told me the same kind of thing. So I don't have any reason to doubt it. But I wanted my uncle to at least shed some light on why mom was the way she was, because my dad would tell me terrible things when I was just a 9-year-old little kid when we'd be out trout fishing, and he would tell me things that no little kid should hear from their parent. My dad would openly share things with me that you should never, ever tell a little kid. They're not adult enough to hear what my dad would tell me. And I remember that disturbed me greatly, what my dad would share with me. And now that I'm much older, at 50 years old, and though I don't have kids, I look back with a more educated mind as an adult, and I think to myself, my God, if I had kids, especially a son, I would not be telling my son what my dad told me at that age. That's not something you tell a kid, a child. And I don't know why my dad did that, but my dad would share things with me that he would probably share with a buddy of his from the military in a bar. And I didn't really appreciate that, but he would tell me things about my mother that was disturbing. And so I wanted to hear it from Win of why my mom was that way. Because you guys, I witnessed my mom doing things growing up as a kid in the house, because I was the youngest and my brothers and sisters all took off and just ran the streets and went to go be with their friends or girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever. And I was the youngest, stuck at home with my mom. And so I endured a lot of the crap, and it was too little to get away. And I saw things and experienced things with my mom that I'll take to my grave. I'll never be able to get it out of my mind. And so I just wanted my Uncle Win to shed some light on why mom did those things. And I asked my Uncle Win, I says, how come nobody stepped in? I said, I know that there wasn't like child protective services that were active in those days like there is today. I mean, because I told my Uncle Win, I says, today, a parent would never get away with that stuff. Today, what my mom did back in the 70s. And he says, I know. He says, I know. But he never gave me an explanation as to why nobody ever reported my mother, why nobody ever in the family, like other relatives that were adults, ever stepped in to try to help. He never answered that question. And I wasn't blaming him. I just wanted to get information to understand. I wasn't blaming anybody in my family. I just wanted somebody that I could sit down with to say, this is what happened and this is what made your mom like she was. He says, I don't know. She was always like that. He said, so much so, he says that even your grandparents, his mom and dad, couldn't deal with her. He said she was nothing but trouble. She was a handful. It made my grandma sick, so sick that she'd go in the bathroom and throw up over what her daughter was doing. And I just wanted my uncle to explain to me, to answer why. But it was the one question that I was hoping to get out of my most eldest relative. He couldn't answer it. So even though now he's gone, I still don't have the answer to my question. And if anybody could have answered it, it would have been him. But he didn't even know the answer. He didn't even know. But I'm glad that I got to talk to him and ask questions. And he told me what the 1940s were like. That was his favorite era, because I asked him, I says, Uncle Win, you've been around so long. And I says, and you've seen so much. What were the good old days for you? And he said, without hesitating, he said the 1940s. He says that was the time to be alive. And then he told me what life was back then. And it was fascinating, because he told me things I didn't even know went on in the 1940s. So I was picturing it in my mind as he was describing it to me, and it was like getting a history lesson. And then he told me about my Uncle Wally, who I just recently did the grave for. And he said, what your Uncle Wally did is, I had it wrong. I thought my Uncle Wally was in World War II. He wasn't. He was in the Vietnam War as an older pilot. Because in the Vietnam War, the guys that flew the Huey helicopters were young. They were like in their early 20s, like drinking age, were the pilots of these Huey helicopters. And if you were like 27 or even 30 years old, they called you old man. Now, maybe some of you vets could probably verify what I'm telling you, because this is what my uncle told me. But my Uncle Wally, being that he was so much older than the kids that served in Vietnam in those days, my uncle was like a senior pilot. He was a corporal. I can't remember. He was a higher ranking pilot, and he was also a pilot instructor. This guy was like Top Gun of that era. He was a master pilot. So my Uncle Wally, his brother, would carpet bomb when in the Vietnam War they would call a radio for backup and be like in the rice fields, and were taking heavy fire from the Vietnamese, and they would call for air backup and do an air campaign. And that's when my Uncle Wally, his brother, would come in with a jet, come in at low altitude at a high rate of speed, and just bomb the shit out of the area. And that's what he did. But he did that as a much older pilot. He was no kid. He was an older guy doing that. So he was like a veteran pilot in those days, because he served 20 years in the military. So he was telling me a lot about what my other uncle did, which was fascinating. He flew bombers, he flew jets, and C-130s. He flew 3 different kinds. Now the bomber, I don't know what, he told me what plane it was, but because he spoke so low, I couldn't hear what he was saying. And I didn't ask him to repeat it, but it was some kind of bomber from that era, a big bomber. And he said when he sat in the C-130 on the tarmac in the pilot seat, he was 20 feet above the tarmac. That's how tall that plane was. And when he would land it, it would come in faster than it could fly. And he was telling me all kinds of fascinating stuff. So I was picturing in my mind my uncle, his brother, carpet bombing in the Vietnam War. And I thought, my God, what that must have been like. And then he'd bank and then fly out after he did his missions and stuff. And that must have just been, what that man must have seen is just incredible. Not to mention my Uncle Win, who was much older than him. But I just wish that he could have told me more about my immediate family, because to me, you guys, though there's a lot of history and fascinating stuff that either of my uncles could have ever told me about their time in the service and what they witnessed and went through serving in the military in those days, long before I was even thought of, to me, what was more important was learning about my immediate family and why I had the upbringing I had, because nobody intervened, and it was allowed. It was allowed to happen, and I don't know why. How can grandparents and aunts and uncles and different relatives or even cousins, how could nobody tell somebody and it just be allowed to continue for years? Because it greatly, greatly affected my life. And I don't talk about it because I want anyone to feel sorry for me, but I could tell you guys stories that would leave you speechless. Speechless. What I witnessed as a kid and what I went through. You would not believe it. You would. I told my uncle this last Thursday before he died. I told him, I says, Uncle Win, I could tell you things that you don't even know about my mom. I says, and it would disturb you. And I says, I'm not going to tell you what I could tell you about mom. But I says, your dad, Grandpa, I says, did know some of it because I told Grandpa, who has been dead since 1977. So I just wanted to do this video to give you guys an update as far as what I did talk to my uncle about, how it, starting out with that, before I would later thinking I'd get more chances to talk about the wars, you know, both with his brother and him and the experiences they had. But little did I know it wouldn't go beyond that day, last Thursday. So, because he died 4 o'clock this morning in his bed. And I'm going to miss him. I'm really going to miss him. I'm glad he's with his brother again. He's with mom, I guess. If mom's there, I sometimes wonder, you guys. I sometimes wonder if mom's there. My mom was terrified of death. Everybody in the family knew it, including my aunts and uncles. And the reason why she was terrified of death is because my mother knew what kind of life she lived. And something I'll never forget. But I could tell you guys, I'm not afraid to talk about anything. I could tell you guys, honest to God, true stories. That'd probably be some of the most horrific things you would ever hear anybody say about their mom. And it might not even be right to do so because my mom's gone. It don't feel right to me to say bad things about someone that's no longer here, but my mom did some bad shit to all of us kids. And it's part of the reason, if not most or all of the reason, of why I am the way that I am. I just processed it my own way, and it made me turn out the way that I am because of it. So sometimes I just have to go off and think about things. But I still process it to this day. It's not something that goes away. Those memories come into my mind, and seeing what I saw, it plays over in my mind, and it's like you never get stuff like that out of your head. It's tattooed on your mind, and you just don't ever forget. You can forgive, but you never forget. And so I just wanted to tell you guys that that's what I talked to my uncle about. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to help me understand what I've wondered my whole life. And that was disappointing because if anybody could have told me, I'm sure he would have been the one. But he didn't know any more than I did. So anyway, you guys, I'm going to let you go. I got to go to the showing on Friday, but I'm not going to go up to this. He's going to be buried in a different cemetery than where I've been doing the cemetery plots. It's a completely different cemetery. He's going to be buried with his first wife. And I'm not going to go to the burial because being I just spent time with him last Thursday, it's too soon to see my uncle be put in the ground. So, but I am going to pay my respects at the funeral home. So I still plan on heading out camping Friday, you guys. I'm just probably going to get there a little later than I anticipated. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened this last couple weeks. Way more than I thought was going to happen. But I am getting there, and I'll have videos of it coming, you guys. So I appreciate everything. I'm going to get you guys all refunded. I got so much stuff I got to work out and deal with. But I will get it done. I will. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.